That's not fair.
You're practicing.
It's a rehearsal.
That was a good evening, too.
Yeah,
I can replicate it that well again. Right. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the June 24th Budget Committee meeting. I want to welcome everybody who's here and joining us live. I'm going to call the meeting to order and start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Nice.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Next item on our agenda is public input. Do not see anybody joining us here at Town Hall this evening. And just as a reminder for everybody, we do have the WebEx open this evening for a couple of our members that are joining virtually. But as far as public input goes moving forward, Town Hall has been reopened and the WebEx will just be for those members that do need to join virtually from time to time. Okay, so I'm going to close public input. Next item is any review or additions to the agenda. Anybody have anything they need to add? All right, moving right along. Correspondence. I should mention Chairman Cutter was unable to join this evening. He had a conflict, but he did pass along all the correspondence that he had, and I will share that now. On 5/28, we received a town budget report. On June 4th, we received the draft minutes from our May 27th meeting. On June 9th, the school BA report came from June 2nd. On June 10th, there was a request from Ms. Harrison to change the date of the November 9th Joint School Budget Committee review session, and we'll talk about that later this evening. On June 11th, we received the town budget report. On June 15th, we had confirmation from Ms. Stevens that she would be remote for this evening. And also on June 15th, we had confirmation from Mr. Hayes that he would be remote for this evening as well. On June 18th, we received the town budget report. June 20th, we had some school questions that were submitted by Ms. Douglas. On June 21st, we had responses from Ms. Harrison and Mr. Isbicki in response to Ms. Douglas's questions. And then also on June 21st, Ms. Harrison confirmation that there will not be a final end-of-year report until financials are closed out on June 30th. And then the last correspondence was on June 22nd. We had a request for the June 14th BA report and a list of encumbrances that were submitted to Ms. Harrison for circulation to the Budget Committee. Any additional correspondences I may have left off? I think we captured all of them. All right. Next item is review and acceptance of minutes from our May 27th meeting. Anybody have any changes to those? Everybody had a chance to look over them?
If everybody's reviewed them, I'm happy to make a motion to approve the minutes of May 27th.
I have a motion by Ms. Douglas, second by Ms. Harrison. And one of the things, too, to mention with remote participation, we do have to do a roll call vote. So we'll do a roll call vote. I will start with Mr. Hayes.
Yes.
Ms. Stevens.
Yes.
Mr. Taylor.
Abstain.
On Mr. Leary.
Yes.
Ms. Harrison.
Yes.
Mr. Barca.
Abstain.
Ms. Douglas.
Yes.
And I am a yes as well. So that passes 7-0-2. My math is correct. All right. Next item up is town business. And I'll turn it over to Mr. Leary for general updates.
The town is close to hiring a new building inspector. We're working out some details. We have a candidate that looks very strong. Hopefully we can get him on board by maybe August 1st, I think is the date we're shooting for right now. Just crossing the T's and then dotting the I's. We've appointed 2 new members to the Conservation Commission at the last meeting. It's a long process, but it's over now. And also 1 alternate. So there's actually 3 members, but 2 full-timers and 1 alternate. And then we had a kind of a tour of Parker Park, which is at the end of Pinecrest Road on Saturday, and a layout of what they'd like to do over there. It's really going to be nice when it's all said and done. There was also a family fun day put on by the Rec Commission Saturday at Dara Pond. It was a lot of fun. Nice seeing the police and the fire officers all sitting up there in the dunk tank. And Mr. Mitchell.
Yeah.
And he was the first one in. And other than that, the only other thing is the swap table is now open at the
Thank
landfill.
you.
Yay.
And that's a reason to celebrate.
I feel so bad throwing things away that somebody can
Yeah.
use, and so I've been hanging on to them.
So much stuff.
Thank you, Mr. Leary. Any questions for the town or for Mr. Leary?
Miss Harrison asked me about impact fees for LMS repairs, and I forwarded that to Troy. So we should hear back, and I'll just send it right out to you.
Great, thank you.
Cool.
Thank you. Before we move on, I did check my mental math in my head. That was 602, not 702. So sorry about that. All right, school business. Ms. Harrison.
So we have had a very busy month. We've had a graduation, a promotion, and a recognition of our seniors, our 8th graders, and our 4th graders. All went very well. It was great to have those events. The recognition and the graduation were outside at CHS. Families were able to come. We had perfect weather for both nights, and although graduation was a bit rainy and cold, but we survived. It was fine. So congratulations to all of the families celebrating those milestones. We had a meeting on June 14th. It was a Monday night, so we had the meeting in the auditorium. We had an update from the business administrator regarding the LMS energy efficiency projects and the kitchen renovations and the phase 1 and phase 2 of those projects. So funding is, we're waiting to hear officially on when we'll receive our ESSER funds, and we plan to allocate the bulk of those towards the project to pay for the HVAC repairs. The board approved $810,000. I think I sent out Andrew sent out the itemized list of transfers that were made to make that happen. So that's going towards phase 1. And for the remainder of the project, we're looking at using reserve funds, more ESSER grants, and trust funds and impact fees that we have in store, so that we can complete the renovations needed at LMS to keep that building energy efficient up and running for another 40 years without having a tax impact if we can. So as was mentioned, the end of year financials are not quite ready yet. We're still in the process of closing out accounts and making transfers. We always budget approximately $200,000 to offset the following year's tax rate. And so that's our intention this year. So we're just waiting to see. I think we'll have a clearer picture next week. The board still has there were some items listed on that list of spend ahead items and encumbrances that the board needs to approve next week. So we'll have a clearer picture on that and the end of the year financials soon after that.
I actually had a couple comments on those end of year financials. I noticed one of the accounts that was being used to fund the LMS was special education transportation. And one of the things that has traditionally been an agreement between this committee and yours is that special education funds that are unused get returned directly to the taxpayer. And here we are transferring them in for work to be done at a school. That's violating a long-standing tradition. So I'm curious as to the rationale behind that.
The rationale behind that is that it's a bottom line budget, and where we have underspend, we need to get these repairs done. They've been decades of putting off maintenance, and
So when we have the conversation, when we review the special education budget and we say, well, we're okay with the uncertainties and overfunding it a little bit because those funds get returned to the taxpayer. Well, now they're not. There's no guarantee of that. So now this budget committee is going to be obligated to perhaps change our stance on how we fund special education because the precedent has just changed. And I would encourage everyone on this committee to consider that. That's a long-standing practice, long-standing tradition that we just blew up. And I'm disappointed in that. And then I had a couple other things. It's a total of 1.1 million in encumbrances. I looked through history. Do you know the closest we came in the past? 376,000, at least I can get back. How do we go to the taxpayers and ask for a budget increase, which I'm sure you're going to ask for, when we have when you add it all up, 1.5 million in underspends? So I'm going to challenge the school board this year to look very hard at their budget, because I'm not going to sell a budget increase when we just demonstrated we have $1.5 million on a $24 million budget that we did not spend. I'm disappointed that we're only looking at returning 200,000. I understand that LMS needs some work, and I get that. And I'm not saying that it shouldn't be done. I'm just saying the process we used is not the process we've used in the past. And it troubles me that we are continuing to deviate from standard practice. We should have that discussion, but I don't think it should be buried in the budget this way.
So a question to ask is as a follow-up to the conversation about the ESSER funds. Is there a way that Dr. Jetty or someone could check with the Department of Ed as to those federal funds and being applied towards a lot of these projects that we're talking about? And I know Ms. Harrison and I were talking about this before the meeting, and there has been some holdup at the state level because they have been waiting for essentially the federal Department of Education to green light these stimulus funds to be able to be used for HVAC projects and other construction projects. And so I think if we can see that those are going to be allowances, then I think part of Ms. Douglas's concern can be rectified from the standpoint that we're not looking at using those special ed funds. We're going to have federal funds that could come in for these particular projects.
It's always the goal to we have in the past spent ahead, and I understand that this is a much bigger amount this year, but we've also not had a typical year. We've had, most of those line items for that the money was transferred out of were salaries and benefits that we could not fill, that we had positions that we could not fill because of COVID. So the bulk of the money is coming from understaffing. Yes, special ed we had a decrease in special ed transportation. That's one line out of $810,000.
But was that due to more students being remote than anticipated?
It could be, or it could just be that we were able to meet a student's needs within the district and didn't have to transport them to out of district.
And that's when I find that one particularly egregious, because we had a discussion here. I proposed a reduction in that and I got killed. And now we have $75,000 in that line. So I'm just saying, when we come back to this budget, come budget season, we as a committee need to take a good hard look, because if they're going to be looking for a significant increase, a new school, 2 contracts, on top of, we have 1.5 million in underspends.
That actually brings up a good point, and I was going to mention it later, if you don't mind. If in the spirit of collaboration and transparency, which I've always been with this committee, I've always been honest and transparent, and I welcome sharing of information and sharing of ideas. So what I would like to ask, I think for the first time in my memory, for what that's worth, I'd like to ask the committee to consider what is a reasonable or sustainable budget for next year and communicate that to the school district. The last 2 years, we've come in with what we believe to be a budget that will meet our priorities, keep our operations running, and improving education, as that's our mission. To be told that it's unsustainable, it's ridiculous, it's a shell game, it's smoke and mirrors. So I'd like to avoid that at all costs, if at all possible, and have kind of feedback from this committee. What do you expect to see?
So I guess
when we come forward,
in that regard, Ms. Harrison, my concern would be that we hear from the public and we hear from different members of the school district that, if I recommend something in terms of what I find to be reasonable in a particular department, I am told you're stepping out of bounds. You should then, leave that up to the experts in the school district to go ahead and put that together. And
Right.
As I've maintained before, that when we take a look at what this committee is for, there's everything that you want, need, things of that nature. And
Right.
then it's just a check and balance of, okay, but this is what can be afforded.
right?
I'd be concerned about flipping the tables there and having this particular committee try to come up with what would be fair and reasonable. And I think a lot of the discussions that we had last year were very fruitful around, you know what can we do here?
Right.
What can we do there?
Right.
So, I mean, I personally thought that last year was very collaborative, but I would very much caution flipping and having us come up with
Right.
a
And I'm
number,
not-
not knowing
Right.
what you potentially have coming up.
Right. And I agree with that wholeheartedly. And, I didn't mean to imply that, whatever you tell us, that's what we're going to bring forward. Because we're elected for different roles. I mean, we're elected to operate our schools and keep them running and to improve education in Litchfield. But, we have, last year was a 0.5% decrease in our overall operating budget for this coming year. And honestly, a lot of these encumbrances are because we feel very strongly that our budget next year is too tight. We're going to be strapped next year. So we're spending ahead on a lot of items this year to make up for that, for having to tighten our belts next year.
And I do think, to Mr. Taylor's point, it was my first time through that process. It felt mostly collaborative, and I think there's things that we've already identified that we hope are going to make it better this year. I know for me, coming into it and having gone through the school budget piece of it, there are places that I feel like I'm going to come into that conversation having better information than I did in the past, because I was waiting on a budget to come to me. I was waiting on presentations.
Right.
I've now got that historical knowledge. And I hear what you're saying, and I think there's some merit to it, but I do think, if we get the budget in advance of all of those collaborative meetings that we have, which we're going to talk about here in a minute, that's going to help us be more prepared and have better questions.
Right.
And I think come to those meetings with those department heads with some very targeted feedback and questions and information.
Yeah.
So,
And I welcome that process. I think, like you said, I thought last year's process was better than it has been in the past. And I'm looking forward to doing it again this year. But I just want to, with cost of materials increasing, we don't have the benefit of a 3-year average at this point, because this past year and last year were a complete anomaly because of COVID. So, if we can kind of get on the same page to begin with, so we're not coming out of left field and you're not coming out of right field, I think it'll streamline the process a little more.
I'm sorry. No, go ahead. What I would love to see
Yeah.
is perhaps a stack rank from you in
Mhm.
terms of areas that you feel that we cut too much.
Okay.
And then we can go ahead and take a look at those areas. When
Sounds
I
good.
take a look at the town one, I mean, obviously it's not a huge line item, but we had a spirited discussion around gasoline.
Right.
To date, we've already spent half. Unfortunately, probably for the first 4 months, we were getting gasoline at $1.60.
Mm-hmm.
And now at this point, it's $3. And I realize that there's a
Right.
difference. We don't pay the tax, but just for round numbers that people are used to,
Yep.
the cost is going to double probably by the time we get to July and August during the summer season. And we've already spent half at the lower rate. Those are the types of things that I would love to be able to see and be able to do a postmortem and say, you know what? Troy was right in that regard.
Yeah.
We shouldn't
I
have
think that's
cut as much as we should have, so that way, you know what, we're learning from experience instead of just, like you said, every single year just coming out of left field and right field and just starting all over again.
Right.
If we don't learn from the previous year with specific examples, we're
Mhm.
just going to run into the same
I
problem
think
over and over and over.
that's
again.
great. Yeah, I will definitely work on that as part of our presentation moving forward. Thank you.
But I would also encourage the school board, as they sit down and they go through their list of encumbrances and what they're going to improve, to take a real hard look at that list and considering the things that we're going to be asking the taxpayers come March. Is it truly a want or is it a need? Because there's a lot of things on that list that I feel could be misclassified. So if we're going to try to sell something to the voters and try to win their support, we need to do our part and make sure that we're sticking to our needs and not trying to justify too many wants.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Harrison. Any additional questions for the school side?
I guess the only other question I had is, it wasn't clear to me what the plan is for food services. It said, well, and it looked like a few words were missing, so I wasn't quite sure where it was going from that sentence. But I mean, looking back, we've been running negative for at least the past 3 years.
Right.
So in my understanding is food services is intended to be self-funding.
Mhm.
What is the plan?
The past 2 years have been due to COVID. The past
Okay.
2 years, we have had increased revenue from the federal government with the free meal plan that's been approved. But we have seen, but most of our retail,
A la carte.
the a la carte items are where we see the most profit and the most income, and those have been eliminated entirely last year when we had the
But-
remote meals, and the entirety of this year.
But that doesn't explain like 2017, 2018, where there was an $84,000 loss. That's pre-COVID.
I believe that year we had a lot of equipment upgrades
So I'm just,
that were done that year.
I would just encourage us to really take a hard look at that because we haven't shown a self-funding in almost 5 years. That's now 95 grand this year, 125 last year.
Can I ask
Another-
you what you're looking at?
I looked through the past reports, so I pulled a bunch of information from them.
Okay.
So
The BA report.
the BA, yeah, I pulled all the old BA reports.
Okay.
So if you look at them, there's 95,000 of our current underspend is going to go to offset this year's food services. Last year was 125K. We can understand some COVID. The year before that, only 4,000 of the general fund was used, but we ate up a significant portion of what was left of the positive fund balance. We were living off of the past fund balances in 2017, 2018, and 2018, 2019. So it's been a while since we've been self-funding. So we need to,
Okay.
as we move past this,
Yep.
if we're going to otherwise, let's just say we're not going to be self-funding.
Right.
Let's just be honest about what we're going to be doing.
Okay. I'll share that note too. Thanks, Carrie.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Harrison. I'm going to transition to member input and new business. The first item on there is a facilities improvement update, and I'll share on the school side. Ms. Harrison, feel free to add color commentary or fill in any gaps. We had a meeting on June the 9th, and I actually was virtual at the time. And sad that I was, because the first part of the meeting was actually a tour at LMS. I did get to, I think Dr. Jetty carried around a laptop, so I did get to actually see it virtually. But it was kind of a virtual tour of a lot of the work that they had been doing with the entryway and some of the office redesign and everything that was taking place there. So it was good, I think, to be on site and to see that and to see some of that work and how it was progressing. The remainder of the meeting and the majority of it was spent talking about the GMS project and looking at the RFQs for architectural services as well as the owner's project requirements. And so those, if you remember those, that's work is part of what was passed at the last town meeting with the $100,000 for the school board to be able to go forward and to look for architectural services for plans in preparation for potential new school. And so we spent some time as a group going through that, looking at some of those. One of the things that I mentioned and suggested, and we had a discussion around whether those funds that were allocated could be used for this, was taking a look at a marketing firm of some sort. Because my past experience in school districts, when you're looking at building new schools, you want a firm like that that's going to be able to come into your town and tell you, what are going to be some of the barriers, where are going to be some of the groups that you need to go and make presentations to and target and talk about the benefits of a school system. So there was some good discussion around that, and even some discussion around this proposed new facility. What would it look like for the community? What would be the community benefit of it? So I've heard conversations on social media and other places about, Dara Pond and other places, new community buildings. What would that look like, and how could the community benefit from that as well? So we had, good conversations around all of that. That group is coming together. I believe it says June 9th, but I believe it's July 9th that group's coming together again. So Ms. Harrison, anything else you wanted to add?
No, just about covered it.
Any questions for the school facilities improvement group?
I guess the other question I would have is, have we spoken to anybody with regards to our standing on state funding? Because I've
Yes.
seen the list and we're not on it. So I'm curious as
Yes,
to.
the plan is to apply for the school building aid that becomes available in the next biennium. So in order to do that, we need to have the architectural plans and the engineering reports to submit to the state. But it's we actually had a representative from the NHDOE come, who's in charge of awarding building aid, and tell us kind of what we need to do to make sure we cross our T's and dot our I's. And part of that is showing that we are in need of a new, we all know we are in need of a new facility, but that we're using every possible square inch of the schools that we currently have, and that, how we're best making use of our resources. So that's the plan. So
Well, yeah, because
do
I'm
have a
saying if we don't
contact
get on
with
the
you.
list, this is like a moot discussion.
Yeah. So that we have to apply, I believe it's June of 22. So there will be something on the ballot, I think. And then we apply for the building aid and see what we would get, and then it goes on the ballot. So it's all part of the process we're following.
The next item under new business is the November 9th joint school budget committee meeting. Ms. Harrison, if you want to.
Yeah,
Start with that.
I just, I'll be traveling on the 9th. So I wondered if the committee would be amenable to moving that meeting until Monday, the 8th. I know you have a select board meeting that night. I would really like to be there as both the school board chair and the rep to the budget committee. So if possible, I'd like to be able to attend in person, but if that doesn't work for the committee, I can try to make other arrangements.
So just as a reminder for everybody here and anybody listening, the schedule that we had agreed upon, I believe a meeting or two ago, from the school budget side had November 2nd is when, if not prior to that, when we were scheduled to receive the draft school budget. On November 4th and November 9th, we were going to have 2 joint sessions that the school board is essentially running, and we are active listeners and have the opportunity to speak at the end. Veterans Day is after that, and then we start our school budget review process on November 18th. I did speak to Chairman Cutter about this. He indicated he was fine with this proposed change, moving this up to November 8th. He himself was not going to be in town and was going to have to watch either the 8th or the 9th virtually as well. I know personally I'm fine with it also, so I'll open it up to any questions, any concerns, any issue with moving that up to November 8th. I know Mr. Leary would not be able to join and have to watch virtually.
If we have a selectman meeting that night,
Yeah.
I don't know if we do or not.
I think you do.
You think
I'll
I
check
do?
the
Any reason it
calendar,
couldn't just be the 11th, so it's the following Thursday, or?
It's
That's Veterans Day. Yeah.
I have a conflict, so I likely won't be there on the 8th.
Mr. Hayes, Ms. Stevens.
Yeah, I'm fine with it.
I'm okay with it.
And so for those who couldn't be there, Mr. Leary, Ms. Douglas, Mr. Cutter, will just have to watch that part virtually. And
And email the questions, because that will give us ample time to respond to your questions before we meet for the review on the 14th.
And the good news is with Veterans Day, we're going to have 10 days to have an opportunity to go back and watch that. And I feel like that hopefully is adequate time. Okay. So I will let Mr. Cutter know. We'll make an update to this schedule that he has and
Thank you.
communicate
I
that
really
back out.
appreciate it.
Well, did we clear that with the LCTV to make sure that they can do both
yeah,
facilities?
Russ.
Yeah, I'll be covering the selections meeting that night.
So
So
you-
I don't know who's gonna cover this. So
I just knew that they had sound issues when they just had their school board meeting down at the.
Yeah.
Yeah, the auditorium is an impossible place to cover.
Yeah, I believe it. So I just want to make sure that it's all great if it works here, but if the tech guys don't work, well,
Well, I
then
think we were planning on being in the auditorium on the 9th anyway.
Okay.
Like we were
So the
last
school
year.
is going to have to
Yeah,
handle
so
the
I'll
IT
make sure-
side of that.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you. I do appreciate it.
Any additional member input?
I did have one item. Not sure if it would be Mr. Leary or Ms. Stevens, the Barron's Appliance.
Yeah.
The proposal as far as moving off of St. Francis Way. I didn't have a chance to catch up. Has that been approved yet? Or
It
is
has
that still
not been
pending?
approved yet. No. And quite honestly, I'm not crazy about that corner
Hmm.
that they want to come out on now.
Okay.
Is that a
From a
public road?
budget perspective, again, trying to stay in my lane as far as budget
No,
wise. Has there been a discussion about, in the past,
That would become public?
Ms. Brian had mentioned that, one of the good things with different businesses is we really get the money from truck registration fees. Do we know if that's part of, if Barron's is approved, that at least we would be able to register their trucks and be able to get a considerable revenue versus just a warehouse revenue?
Well, that was a question that I asked at the meeting.
Okay.
I didn't get a definitive answer.
So then the other question, is that not a private road?
St. Francis is a private road.
So would this become a public road? And would they be doing the
No,
upgrading?
No, their revised plan, they want to move it down so it comes out across from the end of Colby Road.
So we want to add another intersection in that area.
Yeah, but it's not a good, I don't think it's a good spot. That's just my own opinion.
Ms. Stevens, did you have any?
I haven't seen anything about moving the corner like you're talking about, Mr. Leary.
Mhm.
But first step is they're going to the zoning board next month. They need a waiver to even build a warehouse in that zone. It's not zoned for warehouses there. So we really have to see what comes out of that meeting, whether the zoning board approves that waiver or not, and that'll tell us whether or not then they would be able to come to the planning board with a site plan. So it hasn't even been applied to the planning board yet.
What we just saw was a preliminary discussion when they came and presented to the board.
Yes, a conceptual review, yeah.
Not even that. Well, yeah, I guess it was. Yeah. Yeah. Just the beginning
And
stages.
we have seen a few of those lately. I think developers like to come in and just say, hey, this is what we're thinking about. Do you have any preliminary feedback before we submit a formal application?
And ultimately, it's the Board of Selectmen that would negotiate the terms in terms of
No, it's
how we would get revenue, or would that be the planning board?
well, their plan goes before the planning board. They need their approval and zoning as well. But as far as us, it's just they assess the buildings and whatever else they have there, the property. That's where the tax revenue comes from.
Any additional member input?
Just coming back to one of those boards, has the school followed up with, was it the planning committee or whatever about what we charge as impact fees? Because it's on my list of things to do, but have we reviewed whether or not our impact fees that we assess all these new developments is appropriate for what the impact actually is on our district?
I believe Corey has talked to Troy about consolidating them into one school account, because right now we assess different fees for the elementary school. The middle
Right, and
school,
the
and high
elementary schools, I understood was next to nothing.
Yeah.
So making sure that we're actually being assessed appropriately to actually
Right.
reflect the impact that they will have.
I'm not sure whether that's a school board issue or a town planning board issue.
I would think that the school board would at least apply some pressure because it does affect you. So or at least find out where it, you have a vested interest in knowing the outcome of that discussion,
Mhm.
because it will have an impact on how much some people might resist certain things.
Okay.
Do you think they should be higher? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I'm saying if we're currently assessing 0 for GMS, and the concern is that all these new developments are bringing in elementary
School.
kids,
Right.
age kids, then yeah, I want it to be assessed appropriately. I shouldn't have to pay for a new school for new kids that move in. They should be funding that. So it was discussed last year. It was on Mr. Jetty, Dr. Jetty's. It's on my list of things to do. I just wanted to know if it got off the list and actually was discussed, because now we have all these big developments going in and it might be a little late.
I agree. I can reach out to the chair of the select board and the chair of the planning committee.
I guess my question would be, when was the last time we actually took a look at what the fee amount is? I mean, certainly from a town perspective,
Mhm.
we've seen, we saw the fire hydrants last year. So we know the pain there.
Start.
We obviously upgraded the fire station. We're talking about an upgraded police station. We're talking about a new GMS. We're talking about we're actually doing renovations at LMS. Any idea as far as when the last time we actually assessed is the fee?
I don't know if it's ever been done.
Who
owns that?
Who would be
Yeah.
in charge? Yeah, who would be in charge of that?
Planning board.
Is that planning board? Yeah.
So, Mr. Leary, if you could go to the planning board and ask them to
Everybody-
review that.
Everybody turns to Ms. Stevens.
Kate, Kate, are you on the planning boards? You're not currently on the
Yes.
planning board.
Yeah,
Oh,
she
you
is.
are.
Yes, ma'am. We are actually looking at the impact fees, I believe, at the next meeting, but we were only looking at one line because they were pretty high for, I believe it was lot line adjustments. But we were planning on looking at one piece of it. So we might as well look at the whole thing. Sure.
Thank you.
Yes.
It was on my list too.
Should I reach out, Kate, to the chair of the planning board?
That would
Or
help,
Okay.
just having, more.
who is that?
more, Interest from other boards instead
Oh,
of.
Mike Croto? Okay, so he's on capital planning too. Okay, thank you.
All right. Any final member input? All right. I'm going to reopen it for public input. Seeing no one here, I'm going to close it for public input and look for a motion to adjourn.
So made.
Motion
Second.
by Ms. Douglas, second by Mr. Barca. All in favor?
Aye.
But you have to do a
Roll call. Mr. Hayes? Sorry.
Gonna do a roll call?
Yeah, Mr. Hayes?
Yes.
Ms. Stevens?
Yes.
Mr. Taylor?
Yes.
Mr. Leary?
Yes.
Ms. Harrison?
Yes.
Mr. Barca?
Yes.
Ms. Douglas?
Yes.
And I am a yes. Meeting is adjourned. Our next budget committee meeting is August 26th. We do not meet in July. So we will see everyone in a couple of months. Have a wonderful summer. Thank you.
Thank you.